Blue Lock is a manga about football. Well, at least in part it is. Throughout this series, Blue Lock's examination of egoism invites us to attach wider political significance to its football matches. The competitions between strikers are not only exciting narratives in their own right, but they also serve as extended sociological metaphors. What I want to show is that the football field is a mirror of human society at large, and so that the journey of Isagi Yoichi and the other Blue Lock players also serves to communicate broader political and economic ideas. Hello, my name is Sean, and I break down what makes great stories tick. The series makes it clear that its football matches have major political implications from the moment that its protagonists step into the Blue Lock training facility. In Blue Lock's first chapter, the maverick coach Jinpachi Ego establishes two fundamental premises: that the only way to be successful at football is to score goals, and that the greatest strikers are relentless egoists. From these assumptions, Ego concludes that what Japanese football needs above all else is a revolutionary, egoist striker. And so, the first selection of the Blue Lock program is all about bringing out every player's latent egoism. In this phase, Ego pits 5 football teams against each other, but he also guarantees that each team's top scorer gets an automatic pass to the next round. Just this incentive throws the first match into complete chaos. It's every man for himself. Tactics and cooperation are thrown out of the window. This stalemate is only broken when one striker, Shohei Barou, scores a goal and establishes dominance on the playing field. He now crowns himself king of his team and transforms his teammates into servants. And with this, he leads his team to an overwhelming 5-1 victory. What's fascinating about these events is how openly they evoke one of the classics of political theory. The 17th century philosopher Thomas Hobbes argued in his seminal work Leviathan that the natural condition of humans is the so-called state of nature. In this state of nature, there is no central authority, and humans are constantly at war with each other. In Hobbes' words, life here is solitary, or nasty, brutish, and short. This miserable condition is only ended once humans establish contracts with each other, and so transition to a rule of law. And significantly, Hobbes advocates that an absolute monarchy is the best political system to prevent humans from relapsing to a state of anarchy and chaos once more. In Blue Lock's first match, the phase where every player is scrambling for the ball represents Hobbes' state of nature. And this condition is only overturned when Barou emerges as his team's rightful king. The manga follows Leviathan to a T, and with that, it suggests that football is, at least in part, a political metaphor. That Jinpachi Ego's philosophy of egoism is not just a means to improve at football, but also a lens through which we can understand the workings of human societies at large. So with this, I want to turn to what is perhaps the most evident socio-economic target for Blue Lock's philosophy of egoism: liberal capitalism. Egoism is an integral part of capitalist thought. After all, one of the axioms, the underlying premises of classical and neoliberal economics is the idea that humans rationally pursue their own interests. In this view, egoism essentially forms the cornerstone of human societies. Every person performs their function in society not out of the goodness of their heart, but because it aligns with their personal interests. Yet, in the capitalist myth, this egoistic behavior creates a whole that is greater than the sum of its parts. That having each individual pursue their own interests is the most efficient means to generate wealth and prosperity for a society at large. Now, there exist serious objections to this premise, but that's not a topic I can cover in this video. But regardless of the truth value of this claim, what matters is that self-interest is virtually inseparable from the concept of capitalism. Again, the parallels with Jinpachi Ego's football philosophy are not difficult to spot. The Blue Lock program aims to pit a group of unbridled egoists against each other, and this type of competition is shown to improve the level of Japanese football as a whole. A football match, in this view, basically represents the free market. Each match is a competition where the better players rise to the top. This is even readily acknowledged by professional football players in the most recent chapters, and I'll return to this at later points. In this light, it's significant that Blue Lock is a manga about football. In fact, I believe that Blue Lock could not have revolved around any other sport. After all, football is the most lucrative sport in the world. The wealthiest clubs on Earth see an annual revenue in the hundreds of millions of euros, and top players cash in millions per year. No other sport is so strongly interwoven with unfathomable sums of money. In the world of football, there's a vast gulf distinguishing the top players who rake in millions through the sport from anyone else who plays the game. An apt parallel to the insurmountable chasm between the tiny circle of the ultra-wealthy in the real world and all the other people who inhabit it. The importance of money in the world of football is made apparent from the very first pages of the manga. Here, we witness a conflict between Henri Theory, an idealistic new employee of the Japanese Football Union, and his president, Hirotoshi Buratatsu. Theory worries that Japan won't win the World Cup anytime soon, whereas Buratatsu is only concerned about making money. Throughout this series, Buratatsu is characterized through his single-minded drive to make as much money as possible. The series makes him so cartoonishly greedy that at one point, he even wears a shirt with a yen bill pattern. For him and the other bigwigs at the Japanese Football Union, the value of the Blue Lock project is derived purely from its profitability. They first reluctantly embrace it as a publicity stunt until they start worrying that they might not see any return on their investments. And in the end, they try to pull the plug and use Blue Lock to turn a profit at the same time. They decide to pit Blue Lock against the Japanese under-20 team, combined with the most successful up-and-coming Japanese football player. But despite all odds, the Blue Lock team comes out on top, and their success gives Jinpachi Ego free rein to expand the scope of his project. And with virtually limitless resources at his disposal, Ego concocts his most outlandish scheme so far, the Neo Egoist League. What's particularly striking about the new phase of the Blue Lock project is how blatantly everything in it revolves around money. Ego has invited players from the top clubs in Europe and turned the entire competition into a reality show. While the Blue Lock players fight for a professional career, their struggles are broadcast to over 80 million viewers. Moreover, football clubs from all over the world are given the opportunity to place a bid for each player. Essentially, the Neo Egoist League expresses every player's power level through a monetary value. With all this, Eigo does not come out on top by rejecting the greedy values of the Japanese Football Union. Rather, he overcomes the powers that be on their own terms through an even more egoistic capitalist vision. The Blue Lock project can only continue existing because of its ability to generate profit that surpasses anything that came before it. In other words, Blue Lock showcases that football and enterprise, the figurative and literal capitalism of the series, go hand in hand. The same egoism that propelled the Blue Lock 11 to come out on top against the under-20 team allowed Eigo to redefine the future of Japanese football at large. At the same time, Blue Lock also showcases how its players themselves are gradually shaped and subsumed by the capitalist forces of the football world. In fact, this is a process that has been unfolding in the background throughout the entire series, from the earliest pages to the most recent chapters, where this notion is being played up more prominently than ever before. In Chapter 1, we are also introduced to Ryosuke Kira, the rising star of Japan's high school football scene. Blue Lock presents Kira as the antithesis to its philosophy of egoism. Kira cares about teamwork, not individual success. This characteristic is brought to light when he's asked about his invitation to the national youth team. Kira, however, isn't really concerned with his football career at all. He's completely focused on winning with his high school team. Kira is still an idealistic teenager, untainted by financial interests that loom large over football as a whole. But once the chosen strikers enter the den of relentless egoism that is Blue Lock, we watch how they're swiftly transformed from people into commodities. Once they step into the Blue Lock facility, they virtually forfeit all their human rights. This group of teenagers is alienated from the outside world. They stop going to school, they lose access to all their personal belongings, and the quality of their living conditions stands in direct relationship to their football abilities. Those who score goals are directly rewarded with material benefits, with freedom as the most valuable prize of all. The participants of the Blue Lock program are only valued insofar as they produce quantifiable results. All this, again, presents Blue Lock as a metaphor for capitalist competition. The successful players rise to the top and prosper in the process, while the losers are booted out and left with nothing. It's significant that here too, Eigo's practices parallel those of the Japanese Football Union. At one point, Eigo criticizes their business model. The Japanese Football Union generates profit by creating hype for upcoming players, but leaves them without any solid support to achieve lasting stardom. It's important to note here that Eigo doesn't offer moral or ideological objections to these practices. After all, he has no qualms himself about sacrificing the prospects of hundreds of high school students to create one single superstar. Rather, Eigo's concern is that the Japanese Football Union doesn't go about this in an efficient way. What Eigo envisions is a strategy that will produce better results and make more money in the process. We witness the next stage in the commodification of teenage football players with the under-20 team of Japan. This is a very minor detail, but I think it's still quite telling. In the chapter where we are first introduced to the members of the U20 team, we see them wearing branded tracksuits. In other words, the players who have taken their first steps into the world of professional football have become walking advertisements in the process. And what's more, the manga emphasizes that the U20 players are all but guaranteed substantial material prospects, a hefty salary, a trophy wife. Yet, the U20 players are still in this in-between phase. They're not quite professionals and haven't entirely yielded to the financial powers of the football world. This is most powerfully demonstrated by Oliver Aiku, the captain and the most skilled defender of the U20 team. Aiku used to play as a striker. In fact, he harbored the exact same ambitions as the present-day Blue Lock players. The manga explicitly states that Aiku is basically what would have happened to our protagonists if they hadn't been scouted by Ego. In Aiku's timeline, Japanese football offered no room for personal ambitions. Conventional football coaches nipped every player's individuality in the bud, and as a result, all the strikers became bland, homogeneous, and mediocre. Aiku's coach promises him a bright future if Aiku follows his path. But Aiku just can't find any fulfillment in the monetary rewards that his coach dangles before him. Significantly, Aiku rejects the exact benefits, a nice salary, an attractive wife, that enticed his team's main striker at the start of the arc. Aiku's dream to become a world-class striker is now officially dead, and in his frustration, he resorts to the only means of resistance available to him. Aiku becomes a defender, with the sole purpose of crushing all the insipid strikers the Japanese football system keeps churning out. This is an act of desperation, that of a lone teenager struggling against the system. But in an ultimate twist of irony, even this futile act of resistance is co-opted by the forces of capitalism. Comrade Aiku becomes the star of the U20 team, and thereby lines the pockets of the very people he tried to oppose. In fact, the news headlines Blue Lock shows us suggests that Aiku is about to embark on the exact trajectory that Ego criticized earlier in the series. Aiku is being hyped up as the next big player, with the implication that he's fated to crash and burn in the foreseeable future. The futility of the struggle against capitalist forces is perhaps best expressed by the phenomenal role-playing game Disco Elysium. Capital has the ability to subsume all critiques into itself. Even those who would critique capital end up reinforcing it instead. When Aiku attempts to resist the system that crushed his dreams, the system responds by turning his efforts into its next source of revenue. On a structural level, Aiku's resistance against the world of football also represents the last gasp of idealistic opposition to the financial forces that rule over the football world. The Blue Lock players enter the Neo Egoist League, and with that, the realm of professional football, they have no choice but to submit to the power of capital. This is the point where the process of commodification is completed. Isagi and his teammates serve the express purpose of generating profits. Where the first selection merely insinuated a connection between football and material rewards, the Neo Egoist League arc rubs it into our face at every turn. All the Blue Lock players' efforts serve as a means to make rich men even richer. In the Neo Egoist League, the player's value is no longer determined by its coach and mastermind, but by the whims of wealthy club owners. More than that, these financial rankings actually seem to be the sole factor to determine the members of the future U20 team. In other words, the future of Japanese football is now directly in the hands of market forces. Ego spells it out explicitly. The Neo Egoist League is a market in which Blue Lock players are reduced to mere products. This new reality is also readily acknowledged by the foreign football stars who have joined Ego's competition. Michael Kaiser, the star of Bayern's youth team, is using the Neo Egoist League as the next stepping stone in his career. He's here to prove that he stands on equal footing with Bayern's ace, or to win an even bigger offer from another club. Similarly, Manchester's greatest player seems to value his personal branding and commercial tie-ins almost as much as his actual performance on the playing field. For those on top, stardom and commercialization go hand in hand. This is brought out most strongly by the Italian team's coach, Mark Snuffy. For him, the Blue Lock players' belief that football is about fulfilling their dreams is a sign that they are still amateurs. They have not yet been subjected to the humbling reality of being a professional athlete. In Snuffy's view, what distinguishes a pro from an amateur is that they treat football as a job and matches as business transactions. In a way, we see the exact process that Aiku rebelled against unfolding in Snuffy's team. Aiku was horrified by the prospect that Japanese football shaped every single striker into an identical flower. In the most recent chapters, meanwhile, we're shown the kind of football that could only spring from the mind of a coach who believes that football is just a job. Directly after the manga reveals Snuffy's philosophy, it shows that Snuffy's team operates as a single organism, a uniform entity that subsumes all individuality. It's a team where individual players forfeit their dreams and aspirations to form one homogeneous conglomerate. With this in mind, it's no coincidence that the team's ace is the most money-obsessed player in the series so far. Don Lorenzo goes so far that he refers to his opponents not by their name, but by their current salary ranking. His fellow players have lost all traces of humanity. They're purely commodities within the capitalist system of football. So, with all this, I hope to have convinced you that Blue Lock is about much more than just football. One big question, however, is what we should actually make of all this. Is Blue Lock a manga that celebrates or criticizes unbridled competition and the power of money? All this is closely related to what is perhaps the most important question for the endgame of Blue Lock. Will Jinpachi Ego's philosophy be vindicated at the end of the manga, and will the world's top striker indeed be the greatest egoist? I get the sense that this is still very much an open question in the fanbase. But either way, the manga's conclusion will have massive ramifications for more than just Blue Lock's message about how to win the World Cup. The outcome of the Blue Lock program might represent a celebration of global capitalism, or call into question the Western world's socio-economic ideology at the very end. And if you liked what you saw, consider subscribing for more in-depth manga analysis every other week. I'm currently working on another Blue Lock video, so definitely make sure that you won't miss it.